I'm Elaine, this is Elena's XYZ, a vlog that's currently about how to talk to all of the people who didn't want this to happen. Oh my God. If a global pandemic had been the only roller coaster we went on in 2020, it would have been enough. But no, as an American, albeit an American living abroad, but an American, we had to make everything even more anxiety-inducing. If you liked hating on China, well, let's raise you targeting anyone with an Asian face to the tune of 1900% rise in hate crimes against Asians in America. If you were willing to ignore death by cop chokehold, then let's raise you a death by cop knee on neck and a death by cop, I don't know, storming into your apartment in the middle of the night because you used to have an ex-boyfriend who sold drugs. If you thought cocky Nazi rallies were too tame, well, let's storm the freaking Capitol looking like rejects of Duck Dynasty befriending a cartoon buffalo. If you liked one impeachment, well, this bad boy can hold two. And now it's over. Or I hope it's over because I'm filming this a little ahead of time under the assumption that the transition into this new presidency will be relatively smooth and unviolent. It is! But you know, as an American, I'm also pretty proud of myself for not spending the last couple of months cowering under a blanket, because I was busy. And my friends, both home and abroad, were very busy. And they were busy being the most politically involved I've seen my entire circle of citizenry be in my entire adult life. And it worked. Wait, it worked, right? It did! So, in case you didn't know already, since about early 2019, I've been involved in an organization called Democrats Abroad, which is basically here to get the vote out to expats living all over the world. And in 2020 especially, since I got back to Shanghai here in March, it has been virtually non-stop. In fact, if you saw anything branded Democrats Abroad anywhere on social media, I probably had a hand in it somewhere. After nearly these 20 months of getting into the nitty-gritty of the work of convincing people to convince other people that voting is good, and then convincing people to convince other people that voting is still good, even if you have varying levels of excitement about the candidate, I've come across two major key takeaways. One, getting someone on your side is a very important, very demanding skill that we don't teach enough. And this is especially important because, as you know, even though we now have the most voted for ever guy going into the presidency, the man who lost was the second most voted for ever guy. And no matter how trash you think the 74 million people who voted for this clown are, there's no chance they are going to magically disappear into a landfill somewhere, now that we have a saner president. So I hope some of the 81 million of us who voted for the candidate who's not the fever dream of the Iannucci series will take some time out of the next 4 years to lead some of those people to a less crazy understanding of the world. The other takeaway is that every little bit of effort counts. So this is actually going to be probably a multi-part series because there's no real easy way to get people to listen to you. But today I wanted to start with the foundationals, basically the ducks you need to get in order to even begin doing this kind of work. So before you even start getting into a debate with somebody, be it about BLM or QAnon lizard conspiracy theories, or even, I guess, J.K. Rowling's really upsetting slide into turfdom, here are 3 questions you need to ask yourself. Number 1, do they even respect you? Some people have asked me how to have these kind of intense conversations on the internet, and my answer was always, don't. Because changing minds is formulated on trust, and trust is based on respect. And if you have reason not to trust somebody, why would you ever listen to them telling you that you were wrong? And how strongly believing somebody is correlated with respect is pretty intense. Like, everybody knows the Milgram experiment by now, right? Where Professor Stanley Milgram got like 65% of ordinary Americans to shock their fellow Americans, possibly to death, in learning experiments. But if you dig a little deeper into Milgram's research and subsequent studies on obedience, you'll find that those Americans listen up to 65% only if, one, the experiment was done in a trusted institution like Yale, and two, the psychologist in charge was emphasizing how they were in it together. Frankly, the best way to get someone to listen to you, either to do something great like fight for equality, or something horrible like shock your fellow citizens to death, is to be trusted and to have rapport. Which is why marginalized people like POC or LGBTQ or women will throw up our hands and ask you to collect your own. Because we know how much extra work we have to do, how much extra time we have to take to even get to that first level of trust in order to get a seat at the table. Case in point, and this used to happen all the time when I had an ex in the comedy circuit, but basically somebody would make a super misogynistic joke and I wouldn't even say anything, I would just grimace. And that was enough for it to be me being disrespectful to them. Suddenly the conversation is like, Elaine, God, do you have to be like so sensitive? I get that you're a feminist or whatever, but calm the fuck down. And then in the few times that my boyfriend would actually go like, whoa, dude, that wasn't cool, that was the only time when everybody would consider where I might be coming from, and the whole scene would get slightly less misogynistic. Use your privilege for good. Do you know what's the story that they're telling themselves? And this is very important to distinguish from the story that you're telling yourself about them, because let's be honest, we tend not to be very charitable with the stories of the people whose minds we would want to change. I mean, how many times have you gone, they are being intentionally difficult because they're lazy and overprivileged, and that's numbed them from the reality of the world. They don't understand me or my agenda because they just hate women, or Asians, or anyone on the gender sexuality spectrum that isn't straight, or anything diverse or new to them in the world. Look, however many grains of truth there might be in those statements, very few people you are arguing with are saying those stories to themselves. In fact, I can almost guarantee that they have a much better justification in their own minds as to why they are doing the things that they are doing. Everyone, and I mean everyone, holds some fundamental truth in their heads that they aren't bothering to question. This is normal. If we didn't, we would be absolutely unmoored and utterly exhausted in this intensely complicated world all of the time. And these fundamental truths that we take for granted, we are hella protective about because we instinctively know that we would become unmoored and exhausted if they were upended. So when you come barging in, demanding that they liberate themselves from this fundamental truth that they already hold dear, they treat it like an assault, because it is one. Another thing I want to make a very clear distinction on is it doesn't actually matter how important to the future of humanity these truths are, just how deeply they are held. You have to realize that people will recoil physically, body-wise, as in they can't really help it, as much to the idea that police need to be defunded as they will to you telling them that pumpkin spice is basic, if both are a strong part of their personality. The thing is, though, you can actually challenge these truths. What you need to do is find the things that they are already questioning and then utilize those as footholds to softening the truths that you actually want to change. But do you see what's going on here? You actually have to get to know the person in order to strategize like this. In the future, we can go into communication techniques to, get that truth out there. But for now, let's just keep this question in mind. Do you actually know what's the story they are telling themselves? And finally, are you ready to think about this as a marathon? Because the chances that you can convince anybody through one conversation are incredibly slim. Even if it's someone you know who loves you, even if it's someone whose story and motivation and general psychological profile you already know. Because pulling someone from the brink of a conspiracy theory is actually a long, concerted effort. It's like helping someone through an addiction or through an abusive relationship. You can't solve it in one night, and you have to check a lot of your own baggage in order to do it. You've got to let go of the urge to connect with facts or to get angry when you hear obvious misinformation. You've got to prep yourself on pushback, sometimes violent pushback, as you touch upon things that they're sensitive about that maybe they didn't even know they were sensitive about. Oh, thank you. You've got to constantly assess how open the other person actually is to the conversation and know when to back off for the moment, because ideally you don't want them to dread talking to you so that you can actually have the time to change their minds. And yes, you are going to need all of this time, but it is possible. Minds can be changed. And luckily, you don't have to be alone doing it. If you found this useful, please like and subscribe. You can find me off of YouTube on my website or Instagram, and see you next time doing whatever it is I happen to be doing.